Now, we will now compare the modern systems versus legacy system. Okay. So, here in modern system, ang example nga pala niyan ay yung mga data warehouse, ERP, mga search engines. So, ito yung mga bago ng klase ng system. So, what are the characteristics of modern system? The first one is it is a client-server based and process transaction in real time. So, ito na yung kadalasang mga ginagamit ngayon. Real time na yung processing ng transaction and information. And also, it uses relational database tables. Kaya ginagamit yung relational database tables para ma-avoid yung tinatawag natin na data redundancy. At saka bina-validate din yung mga data na nandun sa database. The next one is it have high degree of process integration and data sharing. So, pag modern systems na, madali nang i-integrate yung process. For example, when it comes to selling or buying, wherein dun sa module na yon pine-prepare ang mga invoices and orders. Pwede na siyang i-integrate sa accounts para at the same time, the transactions or the data is captured na sa accounts module para madali na rin makapag-generate ng mga financial reports. And also, those data can be shared na easily. And then, some are mainframe-based and use batch processing. So, yung iba, mainframe-based. Pag sinabi nating mainframe, ito yung mga malalaking computers na ginagamit sa large volume of data processing. Yan. So, some firms employ legacy systems for certain aspects of their data processing. Example yan, accountants need to understand legacy system. So, meron kasing mga company na hindi pa rin gumagamit ng modern system, kundi legacy system pa rin yung ginagamit nila. Pero ano nga ba yung legacy system? So, these are the characteristics of legacy system. The first one is mainframe-based application. So, gumagamit nga siya ng mainframe computer. Kasi nga, usually, ang ginagawa dito is batch processing. Okay? Sabi nga dito, it is batch-oriented. So, iniipon muna yung mga data and then pinaprocess siya in one run. For example, for the day, ayun, saka siya ipaprocess, iipunin muna siya. Next, early legacy system uses flat files for data storage. Later, legacy system use hierarchical and network databases, and then data storage system promote a single user environment that discourages information integration. So, makita natin dito, single user environment lang siya. So, hindi siya kagaya ng modern system na meron ng process integration. Dito, mahirap pang i-integrate yung information kasi nga single user environment lang yung ginagamit sa kanya. So, ano ba yung mga example nitong legacy system na to? Example nito, customers account in banks, air traffic control, at saka energy distribution. Ito yung mga example ng mga company or type of businesses na until now gumagamit pa rin ng legacy system. At saka, ang reason din ng iba kung bakit legacy system pa rin sila. For example, they've been using legacy system for a long time. Tapos, yung mga operating system nila and also their computers na ginagamit is old version pa. Kaya hindi sila pa makakonvert into modern system dahil they have to replace those computers ng mga newer version, and then also their operating system kailangan din nilang i-update, and siguro nakikita nila na it will be too much costly, malaki yung investment na ilalabas. Kaya until now, legacy system pa rin yung ginagamit. Pero, ang legacy system, it is considered as obsolete and old method na. Kadalasan na rin talaga ang ginagamit na ng mga company ay yung modern system. Okay. Next is the database backup procedure. So, merong dalawang klase ng pagba-backup sa database. The first one is the destructive updates leave no backup. So, ito yung mahirap kasi kapag ka-in-update mo yung system, buburahin niya na lahat yung old files or old data. Kaya ang nangyayari, wala nang backup. And then the other one, to preserve adequate records, backup procedures must be implemented. So, example nito, meron tayong master file being updated and is copied as backup. And then a recovery program uses the backup to create a pre-update version of the master file. Okay. So here is the computer-based accounting system. So there are two broad classes of systems. The first one is the batch system and the second one is the real-time system. Yung batch system, ito yung ginagamit sa legacy system. And then yung real-time system, ito naman yung modern systems. Doon muna tayo sa batch processing. Okay, so batch processing, what is a batch? A batch is a group of similar transactions that are accumulated over time and then processed together. Ang example nito, yung mga sales order. For example, sa isang araw, iipunin nila lahat ng sales order na natanggap nila. And then after that, at the end of the day, there will be allotted time wherein ipaprocess na nila yung mga order na ito at a batch. Okay, so the transactions must be independent of one another during the time period over which the transaction is accumulated in order for batch processing to be appropriate. So, yun nga, they should be independent from one another. And then, here, in batch processing, time lag exists between the event and the processing. Kasi nga, like I said, iipunin muna nila lahat ng similar transaction, tapos sa kanila yun ipaprocess sa isang processing lang. So, may time lag na nangyayari. Okay, so here is a diagram. This figure show how batch processing and sequential file is done. So what are the steps in batch processing and sequential file? The first one is the keystroke, where the source documents are transcribed by clerks to magnetic tape for processing later. So, ilalagay muna siya sa magnetic tape, ini-store muna siya doon, and then, hindi pa siya muna ipaprocess. The edit run is here. The clerical errors are identified in batch and then they are placed into an error file. The sort run naman is the transaction file is placed in the same order as the master file using a primary key. So pag sinabi nating primary key, it is the unique data na nandoon sa information or unique symbol. Kasi nga 'di ba, katulad niyan merong mga magkakapareho ng pangalan, magkakapareho ng address. So there should be one data na unique for each customer, like yung account number nila. Yan. So yun yung tinatawag natin na primary key. The next one is the update run. Changes the value of appropriate fields in the master file to reflect the transaction. And then the last part is the backup procedure, wherein the original master continues to exist and a new file is created. So these are the steps in batch processing. So what are the advantages of batch processing? Its first advantage is it can increase efficiency. Okay, kasi nga 'di ba, the transactions are grouped into large numbers and into batches rather than processing each event separately. So kaya mas nagiging efficient yung processing ng information. And then the other one is batch processing provides control over the transaction process via control figures. Ang example nito is, um, kunwari yung ipaprocess nila ay sales order. For example, sa isang batch, ang total lahat ng sales order na yun is 100,000. So, habang pinaprocess yung batch na yun, at a certain point, kinakalculate nila, nire-recalculate nila yung total ng orders during the processing. So, ma-identify nila kung nagkakaroon ba ng error in the processing if hindi magmamatch yung total ng sales order dun sa pre-computed total amount which is the 100,000. So, these are the two advantages of batch processing. What are the implications naman or some disadvantages in designing batch system? The first one is um, because of large transaction batches, average transaction cost is reduced when processing fixed cost. Di ba? For example, the fixed cost for that particular processing is 100,000. So the greater the number of transaction that is within a batch, the smaller will be the fixed cost per transaction. So, ano ang tendency dyan? Ang tendency dyan is to maximize masyado yung number of transaction that is put into one batch, which might compromise the quality of processing. And the next one is finding error in a very large batch may prove difficult. Kasi nga 'di ba, marami yung transaction in a batch. So, mahirap i-identify agad yung error. We will now go to the real-time systems. Ayan. So, itong real-time systems, ito yung kadalasan ng ginagamit ngayon. Okay, so ano ba ang real-time system? It process transactions individually at a moment the economic event occur. So, ibig sabihin, once a customer places a sales order, agad-agad maipaprocess na yon. It will be converted into sales invoice and then uh, it will create order dun sa warehouse and then it will prompt delivery to the customer. So, pinaprocess sila kaagad. And then, kaya nga, here, there is no time lag between the economic event and the processing. Yun nga lang, if real-time system, it will require greater resources than batch processing. Kasi nga, di ba, kailangan ng mas malaking dedicated processing capacity. So, these cost differentials are decreasing. And then, oftentimes, they have longer system development time. Kasi nga, 'di ba, ang kailangan mong i-develop yung system mo para magawa itong real-time system na 'to. So, mas advanced yung system na kailangan mo para magawa ito. Okay, here's the characteristic differences between batch and real-time processing. Yan, information time frame sa batch may lag, sa real-time there is no lag. When it comes to resources, sa batch, fewer resources lang ang kinakailangan. Pero, sa real-time, more resources are required. Operational efficiency, certain records are processed after the event to avoid operational delays. Here naman, all records pertaining to the event are processed immediately. So, mas mas efficient yung batch kesa sa real time. Kasi nga, 'di ba, iniipon muna nila yung transaction bago nila i-process. Kaya, konting amount of time lang ang nako-consume sa processing of information. Now, why do so many AIS use batch processing? Siguro ito, kasi kung titingnan naman ninyo yung date nung textbook natin, it is way back 2000, ano nga ba ito? 2011. Yes, 2011. So, siguro by that time, maraming mas prefer pa rin when it comes to accounting information system na gumamit ng batch processing. Pero I think sa panahon natin ngayon, mas marami na yung gumagamit ng real-time system. Kasi nga, mas affordable na rin yung mga ganitong system. And also, yung pagde-develop nito, though expensive pa rin, pero mas marami yung advantages kaysa sa disadvantages. But we will still discuss this portion where the question on why many AIS uses batch processing. So, the first reason is that AIS processing is characterized by high volume, independent transactions such as recording cash receipts, checks received in the mail. So, when it comes to AIS, mas preferred yung batch kasi nga high volume, independent transaction ang pinaprocess dito. Okay, the next one is the processing of such high volume checks can be done during the off-peak computer time. Okay, so pwede kasing i-schedule yung processing ng information na hindi sasabay dun sa peak computer time where all of the employees are using the computer. So, pwede siyang gamitin, pwede siyang i-process after ng mabawasan na yung mga gumagamit ng computer. So, para mas madali yung processing. And then, one reason why batch processing maybe is because it is done using real-time data collection. Okay, so yung real-time kasi ginagamit na siya sa data collection. So, mas preferred na sa AIS na batch processing na lang. Okay, so kuhaan nyo pagdating sa data collection, where they gather the data, real-time yung ginagamit. Pero pag ipaprocess na yung data, batch ang ginagamit. Okay, next. Uses of coding in AIS. So, dito kasi sa PowerPoint presentation, hindi na diniscuss yung system without codes. Pero, bibigyan ko lang ng konting emphasis. Okay, so kung nabasa nyo yung portion na yun, the reason kung bakit tayo naglalagay ng coding sa AIS, kasi ang example niyan, example na lang yan yung pangalan ng customer. For example, meron kang 10 John Smith na customer. So, paano mo kung sinong John Smith yon, 'di ba? And also, several customers may have the same address. May have similar address and attributes. So, mahirap i-identify, 'di ba? So, another one, pagdating naman um, sa product. So, how can you distinguish one inventory from the other? Example nga dun sa book, di ba? Yung inventory ng nuts. Okay, so there are only 3 distinguishing attributes, which are the size, material, and thread type. Ngayon, if you're going to describe in your entry each of these distinguishing attributes ng nuts na yon, anong mangyayari sa entry mo? 'Di ba nakalagay din yun doon on page 76. So, ang mangyayari, sobrang haba ng account title mo. Okay? Because you still, kunwari, debit ka ng inventory, but then you have to put the description of that kind of nut, like 1/2 case, hardened steel, and standard thread. Ngayon, kaya tayo gagamit ng coding sa AIS. Okay? So, uses of coding in AIS. The first one is it concisely represents large amounts of complex information that would otherwise be unmanageable. So, sa accounting kasi, 'di ba? ah Account titles na nga lang ang dami na. For example, accounts receivable. Under accounts receivable, you have several subsidiary ledgers. Ano ba yung mga subsidiary ledgers na yon? Those subsidiary ledgers represent the number of customers that an entity has. So, kung marami yung customer niya, for example, umabot ng 200, so how can you identify each of them uniquely from one another? Kaya nga gagamit tayo ng coding. The other one, it provides a means of accountability over the completeness of the transaction process. Ayan, madidiscuss naman yan mamaya. And then the other one, it identify unique transaction and accounts within a file. And then, the last one is that it support the audit function by providing an effective audit trail. So, di ba kanina diniscuss na natin paano ba ginagawa yung audit trail? So, kung may coding tayo within AIS, it will be much easier to identify kung saan ba related yung transaction na yun or yung entry na yun. Okay. The first coding system that is being used in AIS is the sequential codes. Okay. So, ano ba yung sequential codes? Okay. Ang sequential codes, ito yung, kaya nga sequential, meron siyang ascending and descending. Commonly, it represent items in sequence order, and then it use to pre-number source document. So, it track each transaction processed and identify any out-of-sequence documents. Ang example nito ay yung mga receipts and invoices. 'Di ba yung mga official receipt, meron siyang number. So, kapag may nawala dun sa number, ma-identify mo kaagad kung ano ba yung kung meron bang nawala, kung meron bang na-void, or kung meron bang na-tampered na document. Kasi nga, they are in sequential order. So, what are the disadvantages of this? The first one is arbitrary information and then hard to make changes and insertion. Kasi nga, di ba, sequential siya. So, kapag may nawala, mahirap nang mag-insert ng panibago. So, sa mga system naman ngayon kunwari, sa isang document, for example, gumawa ka ng sales order tapos nagkaroon ka ng error. Sa modern system to pwede mo siyang i-cancel and then pwede mo siyang i-amend. Ngayon, yung sequence niya, yung sales order number niya, the same pa rin. So, para wag magkaroon ng redundant data, ang ginagawa, nilalagyan ng additional figure dun sa huli. Ano yung example yan? Okay. Example is sales order. For example, ito yung code niya. 2019, tapos 0001. So, ayan yung code niya. Tapos, nagkamali ka. So, pag nagkamali ka, itong 0001 na to, ito pa rin siya. Hindi na siya mag-0002. Lalagyan lang siya sa dulo ng 1. Ito, nagsisignify ito kung ilan yung ilan yung amendment na ginawa mo. Kunwari, after the first amendment, nakita mo may mali ulit. So, pwede mo siya uling i-cancel, tapos i-amend, tapos itong code niya na to, mare-retain pa rin. Madadagdagan lang siya sa dulo ng 2. Okay? So, dire-diretso lang. So, ito yung example ng sequential code na kapag may ginawa kang kasunod na sales order, automatically, ang magiging number na niya ay 2 na sa huli. Okay? So, yung disadvantage naman na sinabi dito, nagagawa na rin naman ng solution sa mga modern system na ginagamit ngayon. The next one is the block codes. Okay, so it represents whole classes by assigning each class a specific range within the coding scheme. Ang example nito is a chart of accounts. Di ba maalala nyo, sa chart of accounts, we have the account titles and then the account number. So, pagka ang account ay ang element niya is asset, magsisimula siya lahat sa 1. Pag under naman siya ng element ng liability, magsisimula siya lahat sa 2. So, nakuha nyo, kaya nga siya tinawag na block codes. Okay? And then also, it allows for the easy insertion of new codes within the block. Yan. So, you don't have to reorganize the coding structure. O, di ba? Tama naman. Kasi nga, di ba, pag asset, simula siya lahat sa 1. So, pag may dinagdag ka, dadagdagan mo lang yung number dun sa huli niya. Okay. So, ang disadvantage is it's arbitrary information. So, ibig sabihin, yun lang yung information na makukuha mo dun. Malalaman mo lang kung saang element or classification siya belong dun sa chart of accounts. Okay. Yan. The next one is the group codes. Okay. It represents complex items or events involving 2 or more pieces of data using fields with specific meaning. For example, a coding scheme of tracking sales might be, ayan, di ba, 04094761-99 kasi nagre-represent yung bawat number na yon. 02 for the store number, 09 for the department number, and then the item number, yung 6 digit, and then the last one is the salesperson. So, dito naman, from the code, may rami ka ng information na makukuha. Diba? You will know na the store number, the department number, item number, and also the salesperson. But the disadvantage of this is overused. O, yun nga lang, masyadong madaming number, masyadong maraming information. Yan. The next one is the alphabetic codes, used for many of the same purposes as numeric codes. Can be assigned sequentially or used in block and group data techniques, and may be used to represent large number of items because, diba, it can represent 26 variation per field. Ayan. And then the last one is the mnemonic code. So these are alphabetic characters used as abbreviation, acronym, and other types of combination. For example, nito ay yung New York, NY yung nilalagay natin sa kanya. So, yung user, they don't have to memorize the meaning because the code itself is informative. Ayan. So, sabi nga, it is not arbitrary. So, from the code itself, madali mo nang ma-identify kung para saan yun. Yun nga lang, ang disadvantage nito, it has limited usability and availability. Yan. Kasi 'di ba, hindi masyadong malaki yung range niya para magamit mo sa maraming items or maraming kinds of items as code. Yan. So that's all for chapter 2, which is the introduction to transaction processing.